Okay, we're continuing on with legislative session 2019-06 for March 19, 2019 for the Wicomico County Council. The work session that we have currently is for the Wicomico County Board of Education. We're glad to see everybody here. We should just move the entire audience forward, you know, and do away with this. But if you'd like to come and join us, that would be great. We do appreciate you.
And you guys can bring some chairs up.
We appreciate you all taking the time out from your from the middle of your day to spend with us and go over this. Larry, they don't want to. So it is our quarterly session. You all have been very busy with a lot of things, I know. And I know you've got a budget process that you're working on. In addition to that, so you always bring agendas,
mostly based upon your items, items that came to us from the council. I believe we have one additional item on there from us.
Yes. Cool. Everybody have them all with them? Okay. For Laura? Thank you. Make sure Laura has them.
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to introduce the members of the board who are with us today. Everyone knows Don Fitzgerald, president of the board. Chairman, excuse me, new language we're trying to get used to. Right. Chairman of the board. We have Mr. Alan Brown, member of the board, Ann Sathowski, board member, and John Palmer. And from our staff, we have Dr. Rick Briggs, chief academic officer. We have Mr. Bruce Ford, the chief finance and operations officer. We have Jesse Reed, the comptroller, and we have Mr. Micah Stauffer, who is currently the director of secondary ed, and it's just been announced that Micah is our new, for next year FY, or for as of July 1, we'll be replacing Mr. Ford as the chief finance and operations officer.
Whoa,
so we congratulate you, Micah.
Whoa, that's some big shoes.
But he is up for the challenge. Up for the challenge.
Congratulations.
To deal with us more, John. That's not. I don't know if that's promotion.
That's probably the only reason you took it, because there's a lot of pluses to the job that works good with us.
Absolutely. So the first item that we have on the agenda that came from the council was public-private partnerships. And I'll just go through and what I can share with you at this point in terms of public-private partnerships, and then any additional questions, obviously, for any of the items, please be sure to ask. In the truest sense of public-private partnerships, we think about financing models. And we are currently working with a consultant looking at a public-private partnership or models for a public-private partnership to fund what we're thinking about doing in terms of a future performing arts high school in the county. You've heard me talking about that. We're currently getting ready to launch an ed spec to look at space requirements based upon the program for that, for the school. And so we are in conversations with that consultant and also in conversation with the Education Foundation about their interest in potentially being that private entity in terms of that financing model for a future school.
What do you anticipate the cost would be to implement that?
That's what we're examining.
Okay.
So we start with an ed spec. We look at what is the design, what is the instructional program that we want in the school. As I've shared with you before, I have some experience in this area in Washington County, where we designed and opened the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts while I was there.
Very successful.
Very successful. In fact, I just took 6 staff members with me, was it 2 weeks ago now, I think, for a quick trip to Barbara Ingram so they could see for themselves. Dr. Briggs had been once before, and you have to see it. It is, and it's, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but as I just was talking with someone on the Education Foundation last night, an art school does not just benefit students who want to go specifically into the arts. In fact, at Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, only 50% of those students go on to arts colleges. They all go on to higher ed, but only 50% go on to study the arts in college. It is a great opportunity for students to build the skills that they need for careers in the 21st century.
Is there a particular demographic that you know is associated strictly with that trend?
No, not necessarily. One of the things that I really liked about the model in Washington County is that students are not selected based upon any academic requirement. It's all based upon their interest and talent in the arts. They talked about, they gave us, cited several stories of middle school students. It's a 9 to 12 school of middle school students who were not focused at all in middle school, were prone to fighting in middle school, and had an interest in the arts, went to Barbara Ingram, and have not had an issue and are going on to college. So good success stories in that way. So anyway, more to come on that. Yes.
While you're on that, so was there a major donor that made that possible? It sounds like it was named after
the building
a,
itself,
right.
Barbara Ingram was the wife of Vincent Grow, who is a business leader in Washington County, owned a lot of properties, and owned this particular property in downtown Hagerstown. Okay. And he donated the school. He donated the property. Now, they then had to renovate the property. Right. I'm trying to remember. It was, I want to say, under $20 million to renovate the property. And then they used a public-private partnership to encourage investors, and they worked with the Hagerstown Neighborhood Housing Authority to be their private entity to actually own the property, and there was a lease payment back to from the school system back to the
they found a way to make it work.
Yes, they did.
Right.
They did, and there are different funding models, but that one certainly worked for them.
Is there any conversation at all with SU? Because I know they're looking to do their new facility,
Yes.
and any way to link
Yes.
somehow to link this? Or
As a matter of fact, Dr. Briggs and I met with, and I don't remember who else was present, but we met with 2 of the deans at Salisbury University, and I have an upcoming meeting with Dr. White to talk about a collaboration they're more interested, if I understand correctly, in the Performing Arts Center, the venue, and then what could come of articulation between our organizations in terms of instructional programming and credit alignment and that sort of thing in the arts. So, great conversation there.
It would be a great way for them to indoctrinate those students to go to Salisbury University, right? I mean, why wouldn't they? Right? What's the age group?
9 to 12.
9 to 12. Okay.
Yes, comprehensive high school, 9 through 12.
That's yeah, those are prime candidates for Salisbury University. My God.
Right. So, very exciting. Back to public-private partnerships. Just in a more general sense, obviously the Education Foundation is working very closely with us. As you know, they did some fundraising and provided funds for tech packages for our pre-kindergarten classrooms this year. They're also the presenting sponsor for the Teacher of the Year banquet this year. So they're definitely a great partner, again, in the general sense, and lots of other examples. As I was brainstorming on different examples, and I'm sure that staff could sit here and probably chime in with others, but one particular example, we have an arrangement with Dell Computers. We purchased some of our technology from Dell, and in exchange, they are funding professional development for us. And it's not what you would typically think of. It's not just in their technology. It's in what we see as our needs. They have a cadre of professionals who have expertise in all areas of education, and they provide funding for us. based upon that agreement. Of course, we have support from, go ahead.
Are there any limitations to what the school can or can't do when you start involving businesses and companies in, in that type of contributions? Like, can you?
Hearing this question? Not that come to mind.
Well, there's
Limitations.
conflict of interest and ethics
Right.
requirements
That would be, right.
that we must abide by.
Like you couldn't put the Ford logo on the back of all the chairs in the classroom, right? And I'm dead serious. I mean, what is or isn't really allowed? Because, any opportunity at all to try to take advantage of it,
One of the things, and that's a good question, because one of the things that we are looking at as an organization is the possibility of selling or, selling the rights to advertise on perhaps the county stadium fence or
Okay.
sign or whatever. You may know years ago, M&T was instrumental in donating resources to purchase the sign in the county stadium. And they have their logo, those of you who may remember now, looking at it, has M&T at the bottom. So we're looking at the potential of expanding that. And we have a committee at this moment. Paul Butler's involved with helping us to put together a proposal to the superintendent about expanding that and then tapping perhaps those kind of resources that you're talking about.
Okay.
Would the signs on the fences, would that take away from the different programs? Like I know one of the high school's baseball program sells the ads and it goes to the program.
No, the schools would still be able to do that same type, would not eliminate that at all.
Okay, because they do need that funding for
Absolutely.
the program.
No, we would maintain that.
Does that answer your question? Because I could give you other examples, but I know you're aware of them, our partnership with the Rotary Club and what they provide for us with Community Foundation.
Right,
so
I just
forth.
didn't know if it was a free-for-all, if there were certain restrictions. I had guessed that there were certain restrictions in
And
place,
we
but I
work
just
closely,
didn't
when
know.
we have proposals from entities, we work closely with our legal counsel to make sure that we're not violating our own policies or any kind of
Okay,
ethics. So,
good.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Briggs, will you join me?
Thank you, Bruce.
Give me back up here shortly. Should stay.
So the next item is something that we've been working a great deal on, and that is providing services for our English language learners. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Briggs to give you some data and talk to you a little bit about what we're working on.
Okay, I think we should start with a quiz. You know how educators are. So quick quiz for you guys. How many languages would you say we speak here? How many languages do our students? Because me, I just speak one. But how many languages do our students speak that we have with us here?
32.
How many?
32.
32.
It's more than that.
Ernie?
It's a lot.
A lot.
He drives about 40.
Josh?
Yeah, I
It goes
asked,
18. I was a
18.
little
Okay.
I asked one of the previous superintendents, a lady from Baltimore, and she said it was like 47 at the
Okay.
time.
All right. Well, you guys are pretty close. We're actually around 32. 32 right now.
You're around 32.
There you go. Okay.
His wife's a teacher.
I'm an appraiser.
You're
You know? I mean, I have to make an estimate, so.
His homework.
You're disqualified. Your wife's a teacher.
I'll send you a bill.
I think Donna Brazil gave him the question ahead of time.
You didn't answer that question as a question. That was part of the rules.
What
What
is
is 32?
So, and then the follow-up question would be about how many students, of our 15,000, how many of our students do not speak English as their first language?
That's Bill.
Mr. Appraiser.
Yeah, you put pressure on me now.
So we have 15,000 students, so how many do
Is
not
that the
speak?
number we're using now?
Yeah.
2,200.
2,200.
1,000.
1,000.
3,000.
I said 2,400.
1,400.
What did you say?
1,200.
Okay, you're close. About 1,150. About 1,150. About just under 8% of our students.
Did you get that question too?
But the key part is, back in 2010, it was less than 400. Okay, so,
Wow.
9 years ago, it was less than 400, and as we sit here today, it's now, over about 1,150. So you can imagine I was going to say burden, it's not a burden, the challenge that it presents to our teachers and our schools, having this many students. Bus drivers as well, Mr. Davis, you're correct.
I had to get an interpreter one time.
And it does, I mean, everything from bus drivers to our school offices, when families come in to enroll, it prevents quite the challenge. But it also adds great diversity to our schools. And you know, when I go out to Crown on a Saturday morning for my daughter's soccer game, and I see the Bennett kids of all nationalities playing together and seeing, you know, people who wouldn't normally be interacting but are sitting in the stands together cheering each other on, it creates a positive opportunity for us. So, but as a school system, it definitely presents some challenges. In our budget for this year, we've requested 3 additional staff members specifically focused on meeting the needs of the EL population. We could probably use more than that, but it was a reasonable ask. We feel like we can effectively utilize that. At the same point, we're also internally re-examining how we're meeting the needs of these students. We haven't really changed our model. As many of you know, if you're a high school student who does not speak English as a first language, you go to Bennett. Middle school, either Y Middle or Bennett Middle. And so, you know, you could live out in Mardella, but you need to come in to receive EL services. So we're considering what would that look like if that didn't happen? What if they were able to go to school with their neighbor?
Are they in separate classes because of the language barrier?
So no, well, that's a good question. So for portions of the day, they have dedicated EL classes for those students who are really struggling or just beginning to learn the English language. But that's only for portions of the day. The other portions, they're actually in regular classes, which is another thing that we're looking at. We have students, if you're in 9th grade and you enroll with us, you go to Bennett, and you may not know that this is a pen and that this is a piece of paper, but we're going to put you in a biology class and expect you to learn biology. And I really feel like we're not setting our kids up for success. So we're looking at the possibility of some sort of newcomers program where those students who are just learning the English language receive intense services. Right now, they're not. Right now, they're sitting in our general ed classes, and despite some of our teachers' best efforts, it's tough to meet the needs of those students.
It's got to be a struggle on those kids.
Most definitely. Most definitely. So we're exploring a number of different things, from the newcomers program to how could we best serve our students if they were involved in their home schools. We've had some good meetings with community stakeholders. Mr. Cannon joined us when we met with the Haitian Creole leadership. We have a follow-up, I believe, next week. I actually talked to Mr. Ed Lee already this morning. So that dialogue has continued, and I feel like we're making some progress. But it's definitely an area of growth for our school system, and an area that hopefully will be able to help better meet these needs, the needs of the kids.
It's interesting, and I think I've said it before, is that what's very interesting here is that this is a unique group of students who want to learn. And again, you all are so familiar with so many students that don't have anything to do with the school system. And you spend so much of your resources on kids that don't want to have anything to do with the school system, yet here is an issue where you have students who very much want to be a part of it and want to excel in the process. So it's worthwhile.
And we're looking, I was actually talking with Dr. Hoy from Warwick this morning, where they have a program for parents, for adults who are coming. So
oh, really?
Continue, you know, could we strengthen that partnership so that as our, you know, we're dealing with the students, how could they assist with the parents who are in our community who also want to learn the English language? So looking to continue to strengthen that.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, because that's, you know, as the kids bring home a bunch of stuff, you know, the parents have to read, and, you know, you know, again, parents have to be involved, you know, make sure all this sort of stuff. So if the parents don't know too, I mean, so the more you can do that help, even if the students speak English, if the parents don't, there's a barrier right there.
That's
so
correct.
The more you can do that, it's better.
Any other questions specific about EL?
Okay,
All right.
thank you, Dr. Burns.
You're welcome.
So for the next 2 items, I think Mr. Pavick has joined us. This is Vince Pavick. If I didn't introduce him before, I think when I turned around, you were maybe just coming in.
When he snuck in late,
Everyone
I
knows
saw him.
Vince. He's the Director of Human Resources. And so these next 2 items really are his areas of responsibility. I'll start off with the teacher status question that you had. You wondered about the number of teachers teaching subjects in which they are not, that they don't have a degree. I will say that they're not certified in that area, and how are we addressing this issue? So obviously, we want all of our teachers in our classrooms to be fully certified in the subjects that they are teaching, but you are probably aware that there is a national teacher shortage, and Wicomico County is very much impacted by that teacher shortage, in spite of the fact that we do live close to teacher preparation programs. Maryland, as you've probably heard me say, is an import state. We import over 60% of our teachers to Maryland from states other than Maryland. And so it creates a real dilemma for us, especially in areas that are critical shortage areas, and those are defined by the state. And so we are constantly, in fact, we're in close communication with Salisbury University about how many graduates are you graduating in the spring and in December, and in what areas, so that we can pursue those graduates to fill openings that we may have. However, when we cannot fill those areas, the law allows us to hire conditionally certificated employees. And we can hire those employees according to the law for 2-year periods, for a 2-year period, and they have the opportunity to renew that conditional certificate once. So a total of 4 years. Correct me if I'm...
You're doing great.
Okay. We only hire conditionally certified teachers if they have a degree and they're close to, we know that they can achieve that, the status of being fully certified within that 4-year period of time. So those are basically the conditions.
So they're working on an education degree?
Yes.
But they already have a bachelor?
They may have an education degree
Yes.
in another area of certification.
Yeah, that would be the only thing that I would add to that. Dr. Hanlon did a great job. When I was reading the agenda, I saw a number of teachers teaching in which they do not have a degree. And I think she clarified that, but I would clarify it as well, that we will not hire teachers without a degree. Occasionally that happens in our CTE programs because those are really specialized areas, and those are very minimal. We do aim to hire those that have degrees and are far enough along towards teaching certification that it's realistic for them to get it within that 2-year period known as the conditional period.
Well, does that include people who are, let's say they majored in history in college or whatever, and then are teaching math? Is that,
Yes.
So that's the sort of situation where they can be conditionally
Yes.
certified?
Yes.
How many of those folks do you have? I mean,
Well,
not
in
total conditional
total,
certification.
there's 22 right now that are throughout the system and now this is data that it's not stagnant because we've got teachers moving in and out. On the 1,273 that we had listed, there were 22 that were conditional, and that included those like through the CTE program. And again, there's a great majority of them that are degreed and may, as you very aptly pointed out, Mr. Kilmer, they may have a degree in history, but we need them to teach math because we have a real, big shortage in math, and they might have had extra math classes when they were in school, and they might be very good at it. And so we're very careful about who we're putting in front of the classroom. So I think it's a little misleading, to the public, I would think. But
Well, and how do you determine that? I mean, if someone is, like a history major or something like that, and you need a math teacher in, been at high school or something like that, how do you figure out, all right, this person would be good for that? I mean, are there tests? I mean, evaluation? What's the procedure?
well, a lot of times there's conversations in our I think they're called ILTs. I'm not the instructional person. I'm just the HR guy.
Instructional
But in the
leadership
instructional
teams.
leadership team, sometimes people will express an interest. They may cover a class period while somebody's out sick or on an extended maternity leave or something, and they may say, hey, I was really good at chemistry whenever I was in school, and I think I might want to try that. And so then they'll contact our certification specialists, figure out what they need to get certified. We got people that are dual certified. Maybe they didn't get hired as a math teacher or a science teacher whenever they were hired 10 years ago because we didn't have a need. Now there might be a need, and there might be an opportunity to slide them into another class, whatever makes sense. We try and work with our folks to do that.
Or it may be a principal is familiar with someone who's attempting to get a degree in a certain area, and they don't have an opening in that, but they think that they would do a good job. They've looked at their transcript, and they recommend that they be hired conditionally. And we work closely with them to make sure that they have the supports that they need, and that they receive constant reminders of how close they are and how much more they need to do in order to achieve that fully certified status. And then we're constantly working on the teacher shortage issue across the state, and especially we have lots of conversations about this at ESMIC, which is the Eastern Shore Consortium, which is the Eastern Shore 9 Eastern Shore Superintendents Association, if you will, where we are constantly having conversations with especially Salisbury University and UMES about what can we do to increase the number of young men and women who are going into the field of education. What can we do as a school system to support them when they're here?
You've
So
got some
they'll want to
recruitment
stay.
fairs going on, don't you?
Yes, and we do have recruitment fairs.
So one Saturday and one this coming Saturday?
That's correct. We
There's-
started that last year.
Yeah, we've actually expanded that, and I'm sorry I was late, I was at the Rotary meeting, you weren't there. But, so, I do apologize for coming in late, but we have, we got a team at a fair right now. They're on a Virginia swing, and the reason I mentioned, coming in a few moments late, we do have some private contributors that believe in the teacher recruitment initiatives and have donated a couple of $1,000s for us to add to our roles so that we can further expand our recruitment efforts. And so right now, today we have a team of 3 folks that are at they're at James Madison, and then they're going to swing through and hit Virginia State tomorrow. We will be attending, I believe, 18 fairs this year as we've expanded our reach a little further south, taking advantage of the teacher shortage that Dr. Hanlon spoke of. And I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring you guys. The teacher shortage is a very real thing. We're trying to capitalize on the southern portions of the country, the southeast, where there is there's some opportunities for us to maybe go down and steal some folks from there, but we're not losing sight of the local areas either, including historical black colleges where we're continually trying to work on our diversity. We'll be attending Morgan State and Bowie. And as you mentioned, Mr. Dodd, our fair this Saturday is at James M. Bennett. That's something that we started with a committee 2 years ago. We've broadened it, and it's been such a great success. I don't know if you noticed that Worcester County jumped on, and they had their fair last week. So they jumped the gun on us a little bit, but it's high competition, and to the shortage, the school systems, the colleges and universities, there's been a 35% decline in teacher enrollment across the nation in the last decade. And, not to pick on Salisbury University, but Salisbury University, normally years past, maybe back in Dr. Hanlon's time or Dr. Briggs's time, we're graduating 400 to 500 educators a year. This coming May, they're projected to graduate about 145 to 150. So,
Most of which are elementary.
yeah, and phys ed.
Yeah, I was at a meeting for Dr. Hamlin on Friday at SU, and this was an alarming number. The entire state of Maryland, the entire USM system, so every university in the state of Maryland, in total, produced 4 physics teachers last year. 4. So, and then when Vince talks about us having to go down south and out, reach out, we have to. The Maryland's not producing enough.
Is that a product of us, of our university system, Maryland, not paying attention to our needs, or is that also the larger systemic issue of people not wanting to be educators, given what they see on TV or what they hear?
I would say yes to both.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's both.
But we've had some really productive conversations within the last couple of years with UMES and Salisbury University about just that. And
Dr. Hanlon, you want to share a little bit about growing our own the TAM program?
right, we have a Teacher Academy of Maryland program in each one of our high schools, so that we're attempting to, as Dr. Briggs indicated, grow our own, where we are encouraging young men and women, especially minorities, to go into education at an early age, so that we can, and then we have articulated agreements with with Warwick and Salisbury University for them to continue in their degrees. So
That's in its third year, and we have approximately 30 students that are moving through, and as Dr. Hanlon said, matriculating through that program. Myself and our certification specialists go in and we meet with the classes once a year to talk to them about how to get certified and what are our high needs areas and answer any questions that they have. It's one of the most fun things that I do in my job because it's one of the few times I actually get into the classrooms and interact with the kids.
one of the great things that Salisbury University has done based upon TAM programs is that they have asked just in the last 6 months, I believe, for all of the Eastern Shore counties to provide them with names of candidates who are in our TAM program who may not necessarily get into Salisbury University, but based upon their interest in teacher education programs and our endorsement that they'd be successful, they're going to take a risk on them. So, again, good collaboration going on.
It may not sound logical, but I mean, you're talking about the shortage of physics teachers specifically, right? Will we ever get to the stage where we had teleconferencing, where there would be one physics teacher isolated in, Baltimore County somewhere that would literally be teaching all the physics to all the other counties?
It's online.
We have done that in the past, and we're actually exploring it again. We also have a program called Edmentum, which is an online education program that we're actually utilizing right now in a calculus class, I believe, at Parkside. I think that's with teacher support in the classroom. So it's a real problem.
Yeah, because it seems impersonal, but if you don't have them, you don't have them, right?
Yeah, it'll certainly take some creative solutions like that, and I recently had a conversation with Dr. Ennis, who is supervisor of, help me, Rick? School Improvement. And her and I have talked about we're going to be participating in a webinar, I believe, at the end of the month that looks at that very thing. It won't be Baltimore County or Baltimore City because the other Maryland counties have much worse problems than we have in terms of the number of
We're actually
teachers.
below the state average in terms of conditionally certified teachers.
I pulled that data for the Eastern Shore, and just as an example, we go next door to Dorchester. They, in 2017, had 3.5% of their teachers were conditionals, and we were around 1.7. So.
Okay. And next, I believe, was a question about whether we do drug testing with our employees. So.
Yes, we do it in a limited capacity. We do it under COMAR for our bus contractors and those folks that are driving kids around because it's the law. We do not do pre-employment drug testing in any other capacity, which we could do. It is an expense to do drug testing, especially in an organization our size. We did look at it a couple of years ago, and it was, the price tag to do pre-employment drug testing was so high. And then when you start talking about random drug testing, that we do have negotiated agreements, and the unions would have to agree to that. We did take it to the bargaining table in 2000, and I think I took it forward in 2014 was the first time, and I took it forward again in 2015, and there's no interest on the part of our unions to engage in random drug testing. So what we do have is we have a board policy that deals with those folks that we feel look or are acting like they're under the influence of something, and we have limited scope in how we can then get Ms. Miles and Safe Schools involved to get them over to to get them out of the situation, but we still cannot drug test individuals.
So you can't drug test individuals because the union organization prohibits it?
Well, the union contract does not allow for it. It is a mandatory subject of bargaining by law. It's not mandatory subject whenever you're talking about public safety, so that's how we get away with it with the bus driver. Not get away with it, but that the bus drivers, it's in the code that they've got to be tested, and so they're transporting children around. That it's a requirement. In a collective bargaining environment, we have to have an agreement to do it.
Is that for a local level, or is that what's decided at the state level?
Well, of course, I bargain locally, but all collective bargaining, I think, rolls uphill, and eventually I would say probably MSCA is behind it. It may have nothing to do with Wicomico County, it may have everything to do with Wicomico County. It might be a larger thing for MSCA to not want them to do that here. Because once one county does it, then it starts to,
Yeah, so nobody does it.
yeah, right.
Just nobody in Maryland does it, to your knowledge?
To
As
my
far as other
knowledge,
counties?
there's a few counties that have drug testing, and but they've had it. You know, when I arrived in 2012, it wasn't in our bargaining agreements, and we've been unable to get it in. And of course, even if you bargain it in, there's still the expense of doing it.
Okay, because, a parent asked me that, and just, that's what they said, why do you have drug testing? I can't remember where they had said it was, and yet we don't even have it at the Board of Education, because you guys unfortunately are the target. They don't understand that sometimes even your circumstances are compromised.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Public safety employees do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vince.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed, want to join us? Thank you. Wanted to talk about how MOE, how maintenance of effort is calculated, so
Got some handouts.
really exciting conversation.
Hey, what do you have for dinner?
Maybe one of these years we'll actually understand it.
Pass those down.
First thing we're gonna do is teach Jesse how to use bigger fonts.
I'm sorry. This is the budget book, I just copied it.
Put your glasses on.
Yep. Sure, it's got the page.
Okay.
Okay. So, good afternoon, President Cannon, council members. Oh, am I okay to start? I'm sorry, didn't
Yeah.
jump in, okay.
You're good.
So starting on page 59 in the Board of Education budget book, which is the page you have before you today, we have a detailed written explanation of maintenance of effort. And the following page, on the back of this page, page 60, we have the actual calculation for FY20, and I'd like to take a few minutes to briefly review this page. So, per Maryland State Law Education Section 5-202, maintenance of effort, or MOE, is to be comprised of the greater of two calculations, which we have broken out on here as subsections 1 and 2. And I'm going to begin with the first subsection, which is the minimum share from the foundation program, and it's calculated by taking our local county wealth of $4.294 billion and multiplying it by our local contribution rate of 0.664%, which comes out to the $28.5 million you'll see here on line 1. So MOE, again, per Maryland law, MOE is to be the greater of this amount, $28.5 million, or the calculation under the second subsection, which starts with lowercase I on here. And that begins by taking our student FTE enrollment for the current fiscal year times the local per pupil appropriation from the prior fiscal year. And as I go through, if you want to ask questions, I'm fine with that, or we can wait to the end, whatever you prefer. So it's the FTE enrollment for the current, wait a minute, let me find a place. FTE enrollment for the current year times the local appropriation from the prior year. So our local appropriation for FY19 was $44.16 million, divided by our FY19 student enrollment of 14,341.25 students, equals our local per pupil appropriation for the prior fiscal year of $3,079.51. Now, the law requires us to take this amount and multiply it by our current year enrollment, which was September 30th, 2018, of 14,367.75 students. It's an additional 26 and a half students over last year. And that gets us to our minimum FY 2020 maintenance of effort in the amount of $44.245 million. So it's essentially last year's appropriation per student times this year's enrollment. How do you get 0.25 student? We count a half a kid and how many verses? What's an example of how we would have a half a student?
Full-time equivalent means whether they are a part-time student. We have several students that take only 1 or 2 credits or a credit, and then we have students that are enrolled half-time as well. So that's how they come up with those fractions.
Okay. Okay, so let's see, where did I leave off? So right now, per the calculation, I'm about a quarter way down the page, you see that the MOE is $44.245 million. Again, that's last year's appropriation per student times this year's enrollment. Now, many years ago, that would have been the end of the calculation. It would have been the greater of these two amounts, the $44.24 million or the $28.5 million. However, several years ago, they added an additional calculation under number 2 of subsection 2, which kicks in if the county's education effort for the current fiscal year falls below the statewide 5-year moving average. And education effort is calculated by taking the current year local appropriation of $44.16 million divided by our FY19 county wealth of $4.16 billion to come to an education effort of 1.06%, which, as you can see, is below the statewide average of 1.29%. So that means this additional kicker is going to kick in because of that. That means we have to factor in the lesser of, and I'm a little more than halfway down the page, A, B, and C. We have to factor in the lesser of A, B, or C. Letter A is the percentage increase in local wealth per pupil, which is simply calculated by taking the county's wealth divided by this year's FTE enrollment over last year's county wealth divided by last year's enrollment. So $298,000 per student versus $290,000 last year per student represents a 3% increase. Part B is the statewide average increase in local wealth per pupil, which is 3.2%. And Part C is a fixed rate per law in the Maryland Annotated Code of 2.5%. And so the law dictates that we're to take the lesser of these three amounts, which is the 2.5%. This percentage increase gets applied to the per pupil local appropriation from the prior fiscal year, which, as we calculated earlier, was $3,079.51, to get a revised per pupil local appropriation of $3,156.50. This amount times our current year enrollment of 14,367.75 students comes to $45.35 million, which is, of course, higher than the amount from subsection 1 of $28.5 million. So $45.35 million becomes the required maintenance of effort for FY 2020. And that is an increase of $1.187 million over the previous fiscal year, and I'm available for any questions you might have. That was a mouthful.
Yes.
I mean, just to point out, I mean, we increased the maintenance of effort last year by 500,000.
Sorry.
So in theory, if we wouldn't have done that, this would be 500,000 lower-ish. I mean, you're going through that. So.
Yes, lower-ish, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't do all the math.
The only question, one question that I have is that on your figures with the full-time enrollment, those aren't the same figures as in the budget.
Correct. Yes, sir.
They're lower than what you have in your budget projection.
We can't count the pre-K kids. That's the majority of it.
Okay.
There's a mix between Delaware students that are in our schools and Maryland students that are in their schools, so we take the net of that, and there's a couple other things we have to back out, like evening high school.
Okay, gotcha. You can't count the pre-K kids?
Not this year, no.
They don't cost us any money?
They cost us money.
Cost us money.
It's not that we can't count them, we count them, we just won't fund them.
Right. Any questions from anybody? Okay,
Thank you, Jesse.
very good, thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
And
Do you
you're,
want me to hand this out for you?
sure. So you wanted to talk about Kerwin legislation. And we have been obviously paying very close attention to, thank you.
The governor?
Well, yes, the governor's letter.
I didn't see anybody up there last Wednesday. They had different county schools there, but I didn't see anybody from Wicomico.
I'm sure there were people there from PASAM, the public school superintendents.
Oh, they
Yep.
were, yeah.
Yes, yep, they are representing all of us. So I want to go through this with you. Our finance staff, Jesse included, and under Bruce's review, have created this spreadsheet that you can see that shows you the difference in the House bill and the Senate bill, and the very recent action by the Senate that changed the proposed funding tied to the legislation. So I'm going to go down through it a little bit by little bit and show you the difference between the two and talk to you about what we stand to gain from what I will refer to as the bridge to Kerwin. As you know, the work of the Kerwin Commission is continuing. They came out with their recommendations, but they have not come out with changes to the funding formula. So the legislature has put forth legislation that would be, again, a bridge to Kerwin to jumpstart some of the initiatives that the commission felt were very important, and you'll see those in this spreadsheet. And you'll see the funding that is coming from the state to support Wicomico County. So just take a look at the spreadsheet. You see the House bill, you see the Senate bill on the right, and you see statewide and Wicomico's share. I'm going to be highlighting Wicomico's share where it applies. So the first area is the concentration of poverty grants. That's section 5203. In our school system, from this legislation, in either version in their budgets, is $1.2 million from the state. And the program provides grants to schools that have at least 80% poverty, 80% students who are eligible for free or reduced meals. And each one of those schools receives or will receive approximately $248,000. And we have 5 of those schools. Correct me if I'm wrong, that didn't change to 6, did it? 5. It's 5, okay. 5 of those schools, so that's where that figure comes from. The same, whether it's the House or the Senate. That would cover community service coordinator, health coordinator, and if those positions already exist, we're allowed to use them for other wraparound services that address what I refer to as social, emotional, and behavioral issues of children. So that's the concentration of poverty grants. The next line coming down is pre-K grants, and in our case, we would receive just over $2 million in state funding based upon every 4-year-old full-day pre-kindergarten student who currently is enrolled as of 9/30 of this year. So that's based upon the wealth equalization formula. So Wicomico County would receive more than, for instance, Talbot County. So our amount is a little over $2 million based upon the number of full-day 4-year-olds who we currently provide pre-kindergarten for.
Are all of these figures above? So, in other words, in looking at maybe what you budgeted last year for pre-K and what you were anticipating budgeting this year, is this a number that has to be added to whatever the current counties are already doing, or is this what they're saying?
This is what we will receive based upon what we're currently doing. In other words, your question before.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But it's from the state.
I'm sorry.
From the state.
All right,
Yeah,
that's right.
Correct,
Yeah, not
from
the
the
county,
state, thank
right.
you.
I think John's
Yep.
asking
All
this.
of this is from the state. When I talk about the teacher salary incentive grant, I'll explain how that works locally, but all of it is coming from the state. Okay,
I got you. I'm sorry.
that's
Yep.
okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to skip the next one that has some question marks there, and I'll come back to that one in the end. That's the teacher prep collaboration. The next one is the Teacher Salary Incentive Grant Program. That's Section 3. And we would, according to what we understand, receive $1.8 million. And that's state funding, again, to local boards if the board provides a negotiated and funded average salary increase for teachers of at least 3% in FY20. So in other words, when we are at the bargaining table, if COLA and STEP equal at least a 3% increase, when we apply for this grant, we have to prove that we have negotiated and funded that, and on top of that, we would get this additional, thank you, $1.8 million. So over a step and a half, not a 1.5% for our
What would that
teachers in
3%
addition.
Cost total.
What is the 3% cost total? Do you remember?
The total 3% was about 1.8 million, maybe a little bit over that. Don't know off the top of my head now.
So it's a wash.
And we have been through our negotiations and have ratified agreements with all of our, and we would qualify.
So your recommendation was 3% and not 5%, because in the budget you had a 5% increase, but that was salary and wages.
That was health insurance.
Oh, that was-
Okay, I was trying to, where you got the 5%?
All right. All right.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm just trying to muddle through this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll go back.
Yeah, that total figure for priority 2, recruiting and retaining, included health insurance and included Unit 3-4
Okay,
and funding the salary study that we completed for them.
okay.
This is just teachers. In fact, the language in the law requires that a priority be given to first year, and within the first 5 years of teaching just indicates a priority. It doesn't say you have to spend all of that additional funding there, but it does say that it has to be a priority.
The Kerwin Commission is recommending increases for all employees, like teachers'
Teachers,
aides. That's not included?
not in this,
Not in this?
Not
I
in
thought I
this.
read that somewhere where they were recommending that.
not in this. Okay, the next section is a mental health service coordinator. All school systems will receive $83,333 to fund this position pursuant to the Safe to Learn Act of 2018. Special education, this is where you see the only, and it is significant, difference between the budget that the House has put forward and the budget that the Senate has put forward. According to the House, we would receive about $3.5 million. According to the Senate, that's greatly reduced to $859,000. So any assistance in special ed is greatly needed. Obviously, the higher figure would be more appealing, but we'll see what happens when it goes to the conference committee.
I don't understand all the dynamics of the General Assembly sometimes. Why is it that it appears that the House and the Senate have such opposite perceptions on how they want to fund special ed? Do you know?
I don't know specifically
Yeah.
to special ed unless that's just where they see an area where they can greatly reduce the total, the budget for Kerwin at this point.
It's so interesting, yeah, because as you said, they're pretty much all the same until they hit that one category.
Anybody have any other insights on that?
They were looking for $100 million.
Okay.
That's where they found it.
That's where they found it.
That's how budgets are done, John. Excuse me? That's how budgets are done.
The next area is the Struggling Learner Grant, Section 6. In our case, we would receive approximately $680,000. It's a state allocation for the provision of what they call transitional supplemental instruction for struggling learners. This is specifically for kindergarten through grade 3 with students who are reading below grade level for additional academic support. One-on-one, small group tutoring, those kinds of things. I mentioned the Teacher Prep Collaborative. There's question marks there because these are actually to be written in collaboration with higher ed to in terms of grant proposals that will be funded based upon their judgment of the grant proposal. I know they're looking at doing those grants regionally across the state. Had a very, very brief conversation mentioned to Dr. White that this was part of Kerwin, and so I'm sure we'll have further conversation about the potential of doing something, especially in light of the previous conversation that we've had about recruiting teachers. And then I want to emphasize one more thing that isn't on here, but that is Section 10 of the law states that increases in local appropriations to county boards of education above maintenance of effort in 2020 are to be considered part of increased local funding required by the funding formulas to be determined by the commission. In other words, anything above maintenance of effort that's provided this year will be credit towards future requirements.
Why would you point that out?
Why would I? Do I need to say it again?
So we don't know how much this bill's gonna cost us. You got some ideas how much it's gonna provide to you from the state, but the counties.
For this
share,
year?
Yeah.
Only what, in terms of the salary is the only piece of it that would be part of what I have proposed in terms of the $800,000 above maintenance of effort. For this year and next year, there would be no local requirement. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
No local requirement, and we still don't know what the actual Kerwin legislation, what the recommendations will be beyond that.
Yeah, all they did was criticize the Thornton Commission for years because it was initiated and they didn't have any way to fund it. And that's all you heard from everybody forever. Mm-hmm. So I'm not so sure where this is going to land, right?
We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions about that?
It's a really concise breakdown. We appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice.
Thank Bruce and Jesse. So the only other, do I still have time? Am I
Yes,
good?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
The
yes.
only other item that I had, and then we'll stand for questions that you have, was just to, I want to emphasize, thank you for those of you who had the opportunity to come to State of the Schools. I was looking and I thought for sure I'd probably given these to you, but in case you don't have them,
Okay.
if you weren't able to attend State of the Schools, I think our last joint session was before State of the Schools, so I wanted you to have a copy of that. And specifically today, I wanted to talk in terms of Imagine 2022 about the emphasis that I'm placing this year on addressing the social, emotional, and behavioral issues of students. Some of you, I'm sure, are aware that we've had some issues of late that have been in the media in our schools. And so obviously we understand that this needs to be a priority. And so when you see our budget, the line item budget that you have, I believe, received, you'll note that many of, especially under Strategy 2, are aligned with positions that we believe will assist in that area: social workers, counselors, one additional school resource officer, a campus patrol position, and some others to assist in that area. The students who are coming to us today are quite different than students who were in school when some of us were in school a few years ago. And they're coming to us with and a lot of needs that we have to address at a very early age, and some of them are intense. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have, but I guess the one thing that I would like to just emphasize is that social media is not our friend. From both students and adults' perspective, with students, obviously a lot of what happens between students goes on social media before they ever enter our schools, and then we have to respond to it. Adults who then go on social media in response to that are not helping at all. I would encourage you, when you hear from parents, to have them contact me. Because the best way to deal with a situation is directly with the parent and with the child at the school. We saw that firsthand with what went on at Salisbury Middle. Gosh, how long ago was that? A few weeks ago, when Mrs. Gosnell took the opportunity to hold a parent meeting at the school for the parents of the school. She took control of that situation. She took the opportunity to share accurate information with parents and asked for their support and talked to them about the strategies that were in place for bringing more structure to the students that needed more structure at the middle school. Often we expect that, I won't say often, but sometimes we expect students in middle school to all of a sudden be able to have the structure of a high school, and that is not always the case, in fact, typically not the case. So Mrs. Gosnell did a great job of bringing more structure, especially to those sixth grade students who are in the school. And at this point, I don't even want to say get things under control, knock on wood. But so my point is that we are very much focused on addressing the needs of our students, and when we can do that by having meetings with parents, by working directly with the school, that is the most productive way of handling situations like that. And Mr. Fitzgerald and I talked just last night. We are scheduling a retreat with the board to talk about what are the parameters within which we work. And in terms of our own code of conduct, that has to be aligned with the Maryland disciplinary guidelines. And so we'll be taking a look at making sure that board members understand those parameters and then can be well-versed in communicating. And then looking at any policy decisions that we may need to make, that the board may need to make in terms of how can we address some of these issues.
How does the teacher population compare to this?
Sorry, I don't have that in front of me. I take a look at somebody's.
Is that the student population, right?
Yes.
Oh,
Doesn't look
Demographics.
like that.
sorry, I didn't know what page you were on. No, it's
Six.
below that. Do you remember the percentage of minority staff students?
We're at 8, or just under 8, which is a little bit higher than the national average and the state average.
Right. Obviously, something that we're working on. I believe that we've made some progress in that area of late, but it is something. And frankly, minority candidates are not entering the field of education. So when there are qualified minority candidates, we are all going, recruiting them heavily because we understand the need to have a diverse workforce.
Well, we're taking general questions. Sure. So I know you're working on just the beginning of, what's happening in Mardella Springs with the high school, up there. I've heard concerns from folks in the area that it may be moved out of the Mardella Springs area. So there's a lot of opposition to that. So if you could tamp down any rumors, that would be great.
I'd be happy to address that. Okay. That's not accurate. Okay. It was one of 4 options that was presented to the community, and then to the school building commission, and then to the school board. The board listened loud and clear, as did I, that the community did not want option 4, which would be to build a new school in a different area. And so we have selected option 3, which is a major renovation there at the school. So, thank you for asking the question.
Upstairs.
Tamp it down.
You and I couldn't live in this county if we did that.
I know. Yeah, it was very clear that it was not.
It's just like that the media got that right on television last night. It did make sure that they stated that it was going to be staying in Mardella, and there was going to be some renovation as well as some new existing.
Okay. That's good. That's good to make sure that true information gets out there.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So for Mardella, you're saying that it's renovation, there's no replacement or anything?
It's not a full replacement, it is a renovation, but it's a significant
Addition.
major renovation.
Does
Going up.
that change the CIP, that decision, or is that what you decided reflected in the CIP?
The CIP, I believe, only includes, Bruce, would you come speak to that, please?
I seem to be reading all the numbers wrong, Bruce, but
Okay.
it looks like it says to me it's Mardella High Middle, new replacement or renovation.
That was a
Yes, the
projection.
original CIP was a projection based upon option 1 or 2. As you, and some of you were at the hearings that we had at the school when the firm of Becker Morgan was utilized to do the feasibility study. they came forward, and Mr. Ernie was there at a school building commission when the 4 options were presented to the school building commission. He sits on the school building commission representing the council. And the 3rd option was selected by the school building commission as the option to put forward to the board, as the superintendent just said, and the board accepted that and approved that 3rd option, which is a major renovation, which will cost, it's estimated about $72 million versus what was originally submitted, approximately $40 million. Now, that has to go through the state planning approval process first. So the CIP that would be submitted in 2021 would reflect that recommendation should the state approve this planning approval that is being submitted with this coming submission.
What's the timing on that too? That, just curious, I know it's a.
2023, that's correct.
Appreciate the answers.
Any other questions from you?
I'm good.
Yeah, hopefully, I mean, we've extended our CIP deadline. We're trying to make it dovetail more with the actual budget itself, so that it's a little bit more realistic as a whole. So we're hoping everything stays pretty much the same as far as, we're not seeing any signs where anything looks like it's going to change dramatically. We try to keep everything in line with what you all are looking for as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Good work, sir.
It's good seeing you.
Hey, Don. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.